Welcome, welcome, welcome to the best 3 hours on radio, The Matt Murphy Show. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt, who's out at a wedding. I want to wish a special happy day to all the haters and losers out there. You know who you are. And you can send me a message on the Members Nutrition Super Talk text line at 615-737-9986. I see you, Jason. I know you're there. I know you guys are listening. I hope Ray's there. We can't do this show without you guys. Appreciate you being here. We're going to have a good one today, and we've got a wild set of things I never thought I would say. I think conservatives may need to come to Hunter Biden's defense. Yeah, you heard me right on this gun case. I'm looking into the details. I've got a piece out right now that makes the case that what's happening to Hunter Biden is every bit as political as what happened to Donald Trump in New York. I'm not saying this guy deserves any sympathy. I am saying if you love the Second Amendment and you're not so sure about political prosecutions and whether that's a good idea, I know a lot of you think that it isn't, so I happen to be one of those people as well. We need to talk about this case in a little more detail. I understand a lot of us are just exhausted with this lawfare stuff, but when we're only interested when it's affecting a politician we like, then we miss the point. And so we got to talk about that. We'll lead the show with that. There was another strongly worded statement that came out from Senator Mike Lee, was signed by several other Republican senators, rattling the sabers about what they won't do in light of Donald Trump's prosecution in New York. I want to talk about that because I think we need to realize some of our quote-unquote fearless fighters aren't. It's just more empty words, hoping that we'll treat them, well, I guess like the B-list celebrities that they want to be. I want to talk about the Trump comment that made headlines of, I don't care about you, I just want your vote. The left has seized on that. The Biden campaign has seized on that. I think the flip side is we need to talk about what politicians actually do care about us. Maybe Trump's just saying what all the other ones are lying to us about. That could be interesting. And we got plenty of other exciting things going on, like pink lemonade, blueberries, and the stuff in the garden. If you guys are gardeners, if you like being outside, then I want you to message in and tell me all about it. I've had so many. This was the first season all my blueberries came in. And so my family's been hanging out in the blueberry bushes, picking blueberries pretty much every weekend for the last month or so. And it has been absolutely glorious. The deer, man, they're crushing my strawberries. It's awful. And I know that doesn't sound, in light of all the things going on in the world today, deer eating strawberries may not be a big one on the list. But I want you to know that, hey, there's some things that don't make us insane. Most of the rest of the stuff we see on social media makes us insane. You can follow me on X at D as in David, Cameron Smith. We have the conversation over there. I mentioned the Super Talk text line. As I start out every show, because I fill in for Matt and other hosts on the station, I want you to know what my day job is, what the other things are that I do. I work over at Thanks in Franklin, where they help folks grow their business with gratitude. I'm on the editorial board of the Tennessean. I'm a columnist there. I write for Advance, that's AL.com, down in Alabama, and I'm a partner in a media company. We just released The Ballad of Davy Crockett, which you guys should check out with your families. But that's what shapes my perspectives and opinions. I am a therapeutic foster family. My family is. And again, all of us bring relevant life experiences to the table. I want you to know mine. I want you to know me, just like everybody at this station. We want to make sure that when you're having a conversation with us, it's a conversation in good faith, that we're not trying to spin you or make you feel something because of outside interest. So I want to let you guys know that and be real clear about where we're going. Okay. I said it. I know that it's controversial. Just hear me out on this Hunter Biden thing. he is the victim, and I'm going to use that word, of a politicized prosecution that shouldn't have gone to trial. Yes, he should answer for any crimes he's committed. But when you look at this charge, this gun charge, they said he possessed a Colt Cobra 38 Special revolver while being a drug addict under 18 U.S.C. 922. The law targets unlawful users of or those addicted to any controlled substance. Can lead up to 10 years in prison. This gun charge, the one that we're talking about, is rarely charged alone, like a standalone. It's usually in a high-profile case where the law doesn't really fit what's happened and they're trying to catch a high-profile defendant on something. That's when this one comes into play. But not in this case. They're just charging him straight up. There's 3 counts, possession, and then lying on a form, a government form, when he bought the gun. So a couple problems here. One, I want to make the appeal not for Hunter Biden, but for the Second Amendment. I think it's really unclear here when this law applies. Now, some of the case law has been interpreted that there is a temporal component about being an addict or something like that. The statute itself doesn't clarify what it means to be an addict. So let's say Hunter Biden was on a raging cocaine bender for months, and then he went to rehab, sobered up, and he was sober for 2 weeks. Is he an addict? Is he a user? If he bought the gun during that window. Again, there's some case law that interprets this, but I think it's really vague. It is going to catch people here, and there was actually an excellent piece over at Reason that talks about the vagueness of this law and how it can rope in people that maybe we're not thinking about and we're certainly not prosecuting. For example, marijuana remains a controlled substance under federal law. That's just a fact. Regardless of how you feel about it, it's a fact. People use it for medical or recreational purposes. We know that. If those users purchase a gun, then they're either unlawful users or they may fall under the definition of addict, depending on their usage, subject to the same charges as Biden. The Reason piece suggested that number of folks who are in that cohort could be as numerous as 20 million people. 20 million people. Okay? The DOJ is not going after 20 million people. So by definition, this prosecution of Hunter Biden is selective. Now, the next question is, well, okay, Cameron, I hear what you're saying. You're telling me that this is rarely charged in this way. Okay, yeah. Do any of y'all know another case where they took something that wasn't charged in a certain way and applied it to a specific defendant? Anybody? Exactly. The New York case brought by Alvin Bragg. It wasn't the case that they couldn't point to any statute. It's that the way the statutes were used was very novel. So the law's there, but the way that they went after Trump, because they wanted to hit the defendant, was very unique. And I had, when I pointed this out, I had some folks reach out to me and say, well, it was a completely unique crime. No, it wasn't. Politicians have been paying hush money to people for a long time. The way these laws were used against Trump was absolutely unique. And what we're seeing here with Hunter Biden, is it fair to say this law is on the books and you can prosecute it? Sure. But the way it's prosecuted is relatively novel as it pertains to Hunter Biden. And I think the issue here is that Joe Biden saying this perception of the DOJ, this perception of law enforcement generally as biased. We've talked about lawfare and that sort of thing. I want to get over that. So I'm showing that no one is above the law And by DOJ going after my son, I get to score political points. And then he acts like a tough guy and say, I'm not going to pardon him. Well, that sounds good, except for the fact that Hunter Biden is being treated differently than the rest of Americans that are in this bin, if you will. And so in prosecuting Hunter Biden in this way, you're actually saying if you're high profile enough, the law applies to you differently. And it's for Joe Biden's political gain. And that, to me, is unconscionable. I don't like at all the idea of, well, we're going to take a high-profile defendant and use him as an example to show that the DOJ is what we don't want it to be. That the DOJ is now unbiased because Hunter Biden has been prosecuted for a law in a way that 20 million other people aren't prosecuted for. Don't let him get away with this because it's easy. I understand as Republicans, we look at this and say Hunter Biden's not a sympathetic character. He's a bad seed who's made some suspect calls. He probably has violated other laws for which he should be prosecuted. This gun charge, if you love the Second Amendment, you should look at it and say, whoa, that law looks squishy. That looks like a way for an overzealous prosecutor to jump in there and tag somebody that he shouldn't be able to. And you guys know this, in 2022, the Supreme Court struck down a New York law that required gun owners to show proper cause if they wanted to carry a firearm outside their home. This is the Bruin decision. And Justice Thomas's opinion basically said gun laws must be, quote, consistent with this nation's historical tradition of firearm regulation. Okay, so we've got to have a historical precedent of how a law is applied. And again, we've got a pretty good precedent on if you're high, if you're drunk at the present, and then you're possessing a firearm. There's a lot of states and government entities that have had a long tradition of saying, whoa, 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 whoa. We don't want inebriated people firing guns all over the place. That's not a thing. But the idea of, well, you may not be high or drunk now, but at some point in the past you were, and therefore we can block it. I don't think that law is constitutional now. I don't think you can say at some point in the past someone was an addict to something, and therefore at the moment when they're standing in front of you to purchase a gun, they're sober, you can decline. So you can't legally sell that to them, and they can't possess it. I think you got to be real, real careful there. And a lot of this law in particular that's being used against Hunter Biden isn't. It's very broad. It encapsulates a temporal component that's more than just at the moment. And I think that raises some real questions. And some of you are thinking, well, what about felons? You know, they did stuff in the past and we don't let them have firearms. I'm telling you, folks, I think under the Bruin standard, that particularly nonviolent felons will have their gun rights restored. I think at some point those laws that say if you are convicted of any felony, you can't have gun ownership, I think those are going the way too. I think they're going to end up struck down. And so my point is, if you support the Second Amendment and a broad interpretation of the Second Amendment, you got to look at this case and say, wait a minute, this isn't right. Remove the name Biden. This seems like a real targeted, overzealous prosecution that's unique to one defendant. And I agree, nobody should be above the law, but that means high-profile defendants have to be treated like everybody else. That goes the same for Donald Trump as it does for Hunter Biden, as it does for Joe Biden, as it does for any of us. And unless DOJ is going to charge about 20 million of Hunter Biden's contemporaries, they're proving that justice isn't blind and politics is still driving the train. And I think that's something we should be very, very skeptical of and very concerned of. When we come back from the break, we're going to get any questions we have on this segment and also talk about Senator Mike Lee's letter, strongly worded letter about the Trump prosecution, and get what you guys think about that. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to Super Talk. 99.7.
Closing arguments are now underway in the Hunter Biden gun trial. Also, IDF officials continue to defend the raid that rescued 4 Israeli hostages and a woman walking her dog in Bellevue robbed with a rather unusual weapon. We'll have those stories at 12:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back. Cameron Smith here, filling in for Matt. I wanted to go to the Super Talk text line on the past conversation. This dude's the guest host. Logic is distorted. I recognize that the law is unconstitutional out of space, but if it's to be applied by the justice system, it should be applied to everyone equally until such time that it's repealed on constitutional grounds. There are thousands of people sitting in jail for unconstitutional gun laws right now. What would be equal is the same standard that was applied to Hunter Biden. I hear that. But if a law is unconstitutional, it gets challenged in court. And I think it will. Hunter Biden's team raised this, and the judge was like, no, you can't do that. I think ultimately you're going to see this appealed, not just here, but in other cases where this law is sort of a sidecar charge. Because I think Second Amendment folks should go after it. Now, the only people that are going to go after it are the folks that get charged with it. But I support the Constitution. I support the Second Amendment. And so if there are laws that run afoul from that, I'm not going to call for them to be enforced. I'm going to call for them to be struck down. And I do agree that the law should be applied equally. I'm telling you right now that the way this law is applied is not being equally applied to Hunter Biden. I don't like Hunter Biden. I'm not excited by Hunter Biden. He's not a sympathetic character, but he's also irrelevant as to whether the law is constitutional or not, and whether it's charged consistently with the way there's two things here. Is it constitutional, and is it being used in the same way it's used against other people in like circumstances? I think the answer to both of those is no. And so I reject the notion of, let me put it this way. Incarceration is the ultimate big government solution. As a conservative, I want that to be a last resort because it is the ultimate restriction of your freedom. Everything gets restricted when you're in jail. And so I think the criminal things that we do, we need to make sure, the criminal laws that we pass, we need to make sure that we're willing to take away somebody's freedom that way for a violation of them. And in this case, I don't think this law fits that bill. Again, I'm fine with laws that say you can't be, I was looking at a couple of other days, they use words like habitual drunkard. Okay, fine. If you are intoxicated while possessing a firearm, fine. We can say that that's a violation of the law and we decide what the penalty level is. But if the issue is you had too much to drink on several occasions, now we come up with a label for you of habitual drunkard and we have severed your Second Amendment rights. I think we have a problem there. And I want you guys to think through that too. I understand that we've been told by the media, well, Hunter Biden's laptop wasn't real. It was real. There's nothing to see here. There's probably something to see here. With the tax issues and other things that he's done, his business dealings, I am totally supportive of looking into all of those to make sure that there was no quid pro quo with Joe Biden. I don't think that we're going to catch Biden on that because I've met Joe Biden when I worked in the Senate Judiciary. He's a smart politician. A smart politician knows, and I understand he may not have his complete mental faculties now, but he did. And those guys know, hey, all I got to do is show up. If my son's doing a business deal and I show up and say, hey, it's good to see you. I haven't done any quid pro quo at that point, but the message is clear, is that I have a relationship with my son, and if you want a relationship with me, then it's a good idea to work with him. And I think that's the kind of stuff that's happening. That should come out. But on this specific charge, or I should say the 3 charges that are in closing arguments right now, those 3 charges, I don't think that's just not the right hook. It's not the right thing. It's unconstitutional. It's not being applied consistently. So that's frustrating, but if the goal here is to see that law is carried out properly and that, it applies equally and blindly, then this isn't it. And I get that runs afoul of what we've seen, the lawfare that we saw in New York. But the point is we shouldn't want to have this. There's some folks, the Federalist had a piece out, Sean Davis said it. He wants candidates to list what Democrats they want to put in jail. That's just wrong. Republicans support the rule of law. We're against lawfare. We don't like this. And because we don't like it, we need to be consistent across the board. We'll keep following up on this in the next segment. We've got plenty of stuff to talk about. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
Good afternoon. It's 12:30. I'm Jay Harper with your top stories. We'll get that weather forecast to you here in a couple of minutes. Closing arguments are underway in Hunter Biden's federal gun trial. He's charged with lying on a background check form about his drug use. ABC's correspondent Stephen Portnoy, he's there with the latest.
Defense attorneys wrapped up their case with the president's son declining to take the stand in his own defense. Judge Mary Ellen Orica advised jurors not to attach any significance to that. The First Lady, Hunter Biden's sister Ashley, and his wife Melissa are all dressed in black in a packed courtroom as the trial reaches its climax with closing arguments.
As IDF officials continue to defend the recovery raid that rescued 4 Israeli hostages but reportedly killed dozens of civilians over the weekend, family members of those 4 are speaking out. Orit Mir, the mother of a freed hostage, says she believes time's running out and they need to do more to recover the hostages that are still in Gaza.
They must, all the hostages, the 120 hostages who are in Gaza, must go home, must come home and feel what I feel.
2 men back here in Nashville were arrested after a woman was robbed while walking her dog at the Cortland Bellevue Apartments on Old Hickory Boulevard on Sunday. Metro Nashville police spoke with a woman who said 3 men approached her, one of them carrying a fire extinguisher. She was then sprayed, as well as her dog, with the extinguisher. She was then pushed to the ground and struck repeatedly. Her bag, cell phone, and keys were taken. Police responding to the scene identified 22-year-old Quishan DeMumbrium and 18-year-old Lamar Maddox walking along Old Hickory Boulevard, and they found the woman's keys and one of their backpacks. Her other belongings were found in a ditch near the apartment complex. They were booked on felony robbery charges. The third suspect has yet to be identified. That is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Jay Harper, WTN News.
Welcome back. Cameron Smith in for Matt Murphy, who is at a wedding. I'm sure he's having a glorious time. Jeffrey, I see you on the line. I'll get to you in a second. I wanted to provide a little bit more context around this Hunter Biden gun case in light of Tennessee law. In Tennessee, Biden might be charged with a Class A misdemeanor if prosecutors could prove he, quote, possessed a handgun while under the influence of alcohol or any controlled substance. Okay, like that's what we're talking about here. But under federal law, the penalties are much more severe. And a couple of you asked about the Form 4473 that's in question here and whether it had been challenged. For a long time, people just said, well, this is the law. This is the way it is. The Bruin decision is what's opening up a lot of this. The Supreme Court's decision that says, essentially, the laws that were in place at the time the Second Amendment was adopted are the kind of laws that we're thinking about in terms of permissible gun regulation, and the idea of your status as a drug user or addict would not fall in that bin. At least that's the argument I'm making about constitutionality. But this is what we need to realize is that the difference between the federal law and what they're charging in a Tennessee state law, say it happened here, it's about a decade in prison. Like it is a significant difference in terms of the penalty. And so when we're going to have a penalty that's that draconian, as a conservative, I want to make sure it's very, very clear that it's constitutional and that everybody knows the deal, that if you cross this line, that's the penalty. I don't think that that's the case here. Jeffrey in Portland, what you got?
Hey, Cam. Yeah, I was thinking we need to remember why this prosecution's happening in the first place, because it was looking really bad when they're doing their witch hunt against Trump and then ignoring the whole Biden stuff. So they had to do something with Biden.
Sure.
They came up with charges that had nothing to do with the president, so it could look like they were still doing something to give a cover for prosecuting Trump. So here, a lot of conservatives are celebrating this gun charge because it looks like it's hurting the Bidens, but it's really kind of protecting them, too.
Yes, absolutely.
So I think we need to stick with the values, and they need to look into the real charges that implicate the president, but it's still political.
Yes.
All this stuff, this prosecution is political on both sides, both just to try to hurt Trump.
Yes, I agree with you, Jeffrey, wholeheartedly. I think you're right on. Thank you for the call. And he's pointing it out. He's putting it down where the goats can get it. This is political cover for the Biden administration. And you can come back to me and say, well, it's his son. Yeah. It's his son who's made a lot of money off relationship with daddy, who's done a lot of things that he shouldn't have done, by all accounts. And that stinks. But this is what raw politics looks like. Well, let's throw the book at this guy because it won't do anything to Joe Biden other than, hey, I hate to see my son go to prison. But Biden's probably looking at it the same way I am. Well, I think he's got a legitimate case to argue that this law is unconstitutional and he can appeal that and drag this process out so he doesn't see the inside of a jail cell. Okay. And my political fortunes improve because Republicans can't tell me that the DOJ's biased because they're prosecuting my son. I mean, that is crazy Machiavellian stuff, but I think that's where we are right now. Is the law is being used as a political tool. We've got to stop this. I don't like Republicans calling for, hey, let's have sham laws, sham trials for Democrats. I don't think that's the right way to go. The right way to go is to be consistent and say, this is the law, this is how it needs to apply. If we're looking at 20 million Americans who might be caught up in this law, maybe the law is not written in a narrowly tailored fashion. Maybe we're not being real clear about what we mean and what's important to us here. To be blunt, I don't care about a 10-year jail sentence for a vague question on Form 4473. I want the question sharpened. Are you currently under the influence of drugs or alcohol? That we can enforce. Because if you come up and you're clearly inebriated and you check that, and then I, as a gun dealer, say, whoa, nope, fine. But the idea of we have something here that when you look at the form, it's a flexible definition. You could say, well, I'm not really an addict. That's what most addicts would say. And I'm not presently an unlawful user. So, yeah, that's fine. I do not want the law to be vague. Every time the law is vague, it hurts the freedom of individuals. If you're going to pass a law, the law needs to be very clear in its application, and we need to know exactly what's going on. In this case, we've been doing this for a long time. And somebody asked me on the Super Talk text line, I thought this was a good question. Well, what if Hunter Biden had killed somebody with that pistol? That's when the DOJ typically prosecutes the charge. Because let's say you got a high-profile person that killed somebody. Now we charge that thing as an additional charge on some other underlying offense. The DOJ is not arguing at all that Hunter Biden did anything with that gun. They're not saying that he was shooting up places or doing anything unlawful with the gun. He just, under this law, shouldn't have had it because of his status. And status crimes are weird. Rich in Hendersonville, what do you got? Rich, can you hear me? Rich? Come on, Rich. All right, well, I guess Rich is going to have to call us back. And I went way southern with that Hendersonville. It's Hendersonville. Hendersonville is what I say, when I go down to Georgia. So I just want us to think about this stuff. I want us to be consistent because when we're not, then the left ultimately wins. When we play these games of CEC, we got Hunter Biden. We're going to get him. Yay. I mean, does that matter to Joe Biden? Because he's got a good political narrative now that he's going to run on. And he's going to say, they're telling me that the law is biased and that we went after Trump. Well, look at what happened to my own family because nobody is above the law. There's Joe Biden's talking point. It sounds just like that. Joe Biden supports the law as it is. He likes it vague because it can be used to separate people from their Second Amendment rights. You love the Second Amendment, protect the Second Amendment. Don't play games with it just because you don't like the politician or politician's kid that it's being used against. We got to be specific here. We've got to be clear, and this law is not. I've looked at it 6 ways from Sunday, and there's loopholes there that you could drive a truck through, and if you run afoul of the wrong prosecutor, you get in big trouble. And I don't like that. Again, it's okay to prosecute folks that are inebriated, that are high, that are whatever, while they possess the firearm or while they're trying to purchase one. But the idea that you are permanently that thing, and I know some of y'all are thinking about the felon stuff. Whether a felon can have those rights. I'm telling you, that law is going to go next. Nonviolent felons, once they serve their sentences, they should have their gun rights restored. You don't have to like it, but I'm assuming that those of you who love the Second Amendment want to be consistent. And when somebody's paid their debt to society, their rights should be restored. The case of violent offenders is a little bit different. I think you can make a credible argument that those rights may not need to be restored. But for nonviolent, absolutely. And that's something that we need to be consistent, or we just need to admit that we only want the law to be enforced one way. And as best I can tell, that's what we were criticizing liberals for doing. We were accusing them of lawfare. And now they're doing it in a different direction, and a lot of us are clapping. And I think we should probably stop. I also see on the Super Talk text line a couple things. We'll get to them as we're able to. A lot of you with the gardening, talking about your blueberries surviving hail. I didn't know that so many of you were gardeners. I think that's really cool. A couple tips that I learned. I learned this year that strawberries and asparagus go well together. Asparagus are deep underground. Strawberries' roots are near the top. That was pretty cool. I learned that I'm not supposed to plant my watermelon, squash, and zucchini together. Who knew? I learned that blueberries don't like wet feet. I moved them, put hibiscus where they were. Everybody's doing great now. Plenty of garden tips. We should definitely talk about those. I want to make sure that we have time to talk about the Mike Lee stuff, and I want to get to that, but you guys seem very interested in the Hunter Biden stuff. And your point, you're saying, this is 9004, saying Hunter Biden's going to get a little probation, maybe, or probably nothing at all. The DOJ will make sure of it. Okay. Beat the straw man. I'm not sure who the straw man is. I'm trying to beat on the DOJ and what the law is. I think we need to knock it down. And then one of you, 7672, said, child molesters who have done their time should be allowed to be teachers and coaches again? No, I don't think that should be the case. I am saying that for a nonviolent offender who commits a felony that serves their time, I think the Bruin decision counsels that their rights should be restored. I do think that. It's weird when we just kind of go with the mainstream narrative. And I want to push this. We got to take a break here in a second, but I want us to think about maybe the echo chamber is maybe trying to couch the narrative one way and then make everybody fall in line. That maybe it's not about the rule of law. Maybe it's not about what's happening there, but rather a political narrative, a cultural narrative that's being pushed and that we're kind of going along with. I think we need to start to learn how to push back, and I'll talk about that a little bit on the other side of the break and in the next hour. I appreciate you guys for being here. I'm Cameron Smith filling in for Matt Murphy on Super Talk 99.7.
Closing arguments continue in the Hunter Biden gun trial. Also, IDF officials, they continue to defend the raid that rescued 4 Israeli hostages and a robust jobs report. But just where is the hiring taking place? We'll have those stories at 1 o'clock. Hello. On Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Time flies when you're having fun. I'm Cameron Smith. Heading to the next hour. We got plenty to talk about. Lindsay, I see you over there. If you can hang on, we'll get to you on the other side because I don't want to cut you short. A couple things I wanted to clarify. Some of you have asked on the Super Talk text line, well, wasn't it about lying on the forms? Well, it's the charges, there are 3 of them. There's, I think, 2 lying on the form, and 1 was possession under 18 U.S.C. 922. And they're basically related to each other because the possession and the form both deal with the same question about, are you addicted to drugs? Are you an unlawful user? And that, to me, is why they're all kind of related, even though they are, in fact, distinct charges. 6108 said his dad will just pardon him if he doesn't win the election. He said that he would not. President Joe Biden was unmistakable. He just said no, he would not. You may be pointing out that he might be inconsistent and he might change his mind if he loses the election. That's certainly possible. But right now he has said no. So I want to be part of that or want to be clear about that. And there was a question that you put out, or one of you put out, that said, let me see if I can find it. 8512 said, very few laws are written in language that's black or white and would not pass your clear, put in air quotes, litmus test. That's why a majority of the public would give 50 to 60 different interpretations of the law. Okay, strike them down. Vague laws, we should strike down. We should not have them. I don't like the idea that a prosecutor has a bucket that he can go fishing in for something to charge you with a crime. I want them to do their jobs well, and they can do that well when the law is clear. If we play this game of we're going to have vague statutes that can ensnare people and take away their freedom, that's not conservative. That's not something that I'm going to play a game with, because I want prosecutors to go after people that break laws that are clear and that the consequences for breaking those laws are clear. Otherwise, I want them to leave people alone. I don't want you to leave me alone. I want you to engage, because we got 2 more hours. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to The Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7. Come on back.
Good afternoon. It's exactly 1 p.m. I'm Jay Harper with your top stories. A complete forecast, and it's a dandy. It's coming up in 2 minutes. Closing arguments began in Hunter Biden's felony gun charge trial, with prosecutors wrapping up their case. ABC's Olivia Rubin, she's outside the courthouse in Wilmington, Delaware.
To lay out the prosecution's case for why the jury should convict Hunter Biden, telling them that the evidence in this case has been ugly, but that it has been necessary, and that what they were able to prove was that Hunter Biden knew that he was using drugs at the time when he purchased that gun, and that is what the evidence shows. That is what Prosecutor Leah Wise told the jury.
As IDF officials continue to defend the recovery raid that rescued 4 Israeli hostages but reportedly killed several civilians over the weekend, family members of those 4 hostages are speaking out. Orit Mir, she's the mother of a freed hostage. She says more needs to be done by the Israeli government to bring the other captives home.
Yesterday, I slept all night with a smile. What a big relief. That's what I want to happen for all the families.
With last week's job report showing a surprisingly robust 272,000 jobs added in the month of May across the U.S., ABC's Rebecca Jarvis, she breaks down where most of the hiring is taking place.
If you look at the jobs market, it's mostly strong. There is hiring really across the board, but the strongest areas follow the money, where money is being infused. Healthcare jobs up 68,000, government jobs up 43,000, and then jobs in leisure and hospitality up 42,000.
That is the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Jay Harper, WTN News.
Welcome to the second hour of the Matt Murphy Show. I'm Cameron Smith. Much to Jason's chagrin, we're not getting high right now. We're high on life, but we'll try not to get too wild. Not right now. I have a bag of beef jerky still, so I'll get through that first, and then we'll talk. But right now, Jason, no, and I haven't had anything that makes me want to scream at anybody because I've got Lindsay on the line, and Lindsay is wonderful. Lindsay, what you got?
You're making me laugh, Cam.
That's good.
I say felons who've served their time do deserve their Second Amendment rights.
Yeah.
They should be able to protect their homes.
Yeah. I don't think, I think we're missing something when we say you've paid your debt to society as determined by your sentence, but now you don't have the same rights as the rest of us. Don't like that.
Indeed. They deserve to protect their homes, and the bad guys are going to get the guns anyway.
Yes, they are. And those bad guys that commit those crimes, some of them have not even been prosecuted, let alone served a sentence. So putting somebody who has served their time and hopefully, we hope, has come out better for the experience at a disadvantage there is a bad idea. So I think we got to protect the Second Amendment regardless of who it applies to.
Indeed.
Do you have any thoughts on the Hunter Biden thing? I mean, do you think that this is a prosecutorial overreach for a political statement, or is he getting his just desserts?
Not at all. I think he's getting his due justice. I'm waiting to hear the verdict.
Do you think that other people who are in his same situation, those 20 million people that I referenced, that they should be prosecuted too, or is he special?
No, I don't think he is any special. And I've been taking the pulse of chat rooms around, and the UK doesn't care about the Trump verdict. They're indifferent. Canada, they're for us. They're pretty supportive of our country.
Well, they need to be supportive because they have lots of rocks and minerals and empty space up there.
Well, the saddest part is it's our own that 75% of them don't even want to talk about it, and the few patriots in there do, and the other ones are just falling for the Kool-Aid. They're completely, well, gee, it was a jury. It must be true.
Yeah, I mean, and I think there's some truth. Or we're talking about the Trump conviction right now.
Yeah.
I've wrestled with that I absolutely think it was a biased prosecution bringing a case in a way that they would not have brought the case had it been some other defendant. But that is a struck jury.
Had it been. And that's what I wonder about Hunter. It's going to be completely taken differently. So
you think that he's not going to get a fair trial? It will be, somehow tinkered with? What are you thinking there?
Yeah, I'm thinking tinkered with.
Okay.
And I'm also thinking nobody cares. They're all, this poor little, addict. Everyone's picking on him.
Yeah.
Orange Man bad.
I don't know. Orange Man bad. I don't know if anybody's picking at him. I appreciate it, Lindsay. I mean.
All right.
Thank you very much. I think Lindsay's pointing to something, Orange Man bad, that, yeah, I think there's a different level of treatment. Again, I think we're talking about bias here. I think we're talking about a prosecution that's designed to provide political cover for a president who just doesn't seem to me like he's in control. It doesn't seem to me like, yes, I saw the State of the Union, and yes, he shouted many angry things. Spicy Joe was out in force. Where's he been since then? We thought that would force him out, that he'd have to come out, that he'd really have to campaign. I haven't seen that. I haven't really heard much from him. He did the sit-down interview. It was meh. Everything's pretty curated, pretty safe. I'm still waiting for these debates. I'm very, very excited about the debates. I've written about the debates. Again, I think we should have some physical challenges like sitting in a chair and standing up repeatedly. Maybe carrying some pizza boxes.
I already know how they're going to turn out.
How are they going to turn out, Bill?
If you are a Joe Biden fan, you're going to think he just absolutely wiped the floor with Trump. And if you're a Trump fan, you're going to be like, oh, he kicked Joe Biden's ass so hard.
You think that this is just going to affirm everybody's priors?
Sure.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. We've got Jim in Mount Juliet who wants to talk about Hunter Biden. Jim, what you got?
Afternoon. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Tell me what you're thinking.
Two questions, really.
Okay.
First, are you aware of a recent story about a supposed Facebook post by the cousin of a Trump juror that went up the day before the verdict, where he said something to the effect of, I've been told he's going to get convicted. Nice work, boys.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I saw that. I haven't really weighed in on that because there's a lot of weirdo social media posts and things out there. So before I jump in and say, hey, mistrial, this is a thing, I want to know, hey, is this credible? Is it based on actual information communicated out by a juror? And is there anything that impermissible here that says, hey, we weren't being objective. We made a decision ahead of time. And if those things are met, then I'll talk about it. But right now, I just saw a letter about a post.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's sort of died since then. So, and supposedly the poster was a known internet troll. So maybe it was a whole big. But the other thing I wanted to ask about was I guess I'll call it a theory that the Hunter trial is nothing but a face cleaning for Joe. Mm-hmm. Look how tough I'm being on my own family.
Yep.
Type of thing.
Sure.
I certainly agree that that's something that the Democrats would do in a New York minute. That they have no scruples at all. And if Hunter was promised the moon in return for, bending over and taking one for the team, I'm sure that they would do it. But my question is, what, if any, actual evidence are you aware of that would indicate that this is what's going on presently?
Sure. I think that's a fair question, Jim. The best piece of evidence I have is how this charge in particular is handled as applied to other defendants. And usually this charge is brought as so for example, if Hunter Biden had shot someone with that pistol, then this charge, the underlying charge might have been, it could be RICO, it could be a state level murder charge or whatever. But then that's when the DOJ might come in and say, okay, we can't get, this is a state level crime. We can't get anybody on that, but we can get him on the gun charge, right? There's usually some other activity involved that's not there. And again, I point to the Reason article that I referenced that suggests that this law as written is broad enough that up to 20 million Americans could be charged with the same crime right now. And they're not charging 20 million Americans with this crime. Now, a lot of those Americans are smart enough not to write about their drug use in a book, but this is not how this charge is typically used. It's relatively rare to do it this way, and that's the evidence I'm using to say, hey, it looks like they're breaking protocol here, doing something a little different than they normally do because of his last name. And that's the basis for my argument.
Yeah, it's not historically supported. So, I see where you're coming from.
Well, I appreciate it, Jim. Thank you very much for the call. And I think that's a fair question to ask is, well, Cameron, you're telling us that this seems political. Well, why is it? Well, that's why. It's because we're in a situation where this benefits the president greatly. It's convenient for his narrative, and it's not like everything else. And so you get to pick. Do you just have an axe to get grind against Hunter Biden, which does very little to impact Joe Biden? Hunter Biden's not running for president. Hunter Biden's making weird paintings and selling them and has interesting business dealings. But as much as you can say he's a bad seed and we want to go after him, do you want to protect the Second Amendment more than you want to go after Hunter Biden? I think you got to make up your mind. If it's, well, we want to stick it to him and we're going to stand with Joe Biden and his view of this law is totally appropriate and this is a totally normal way to handle this, that's fine. I'm just not over there because I don't think it's the right way to do it. I don't think it's consistent with the Supreme Court Second Amendment jurisprudence that's currently out there right now. And I don't want to give Joe Biden the cover that he so desperately wants. Do I think everybody at the DOJ is biased? No, I don't. Do I think the legal system is inherently corrupt? No, I don't. Do I think that Alvin Bragg had political pressure to bring that case and stretch the law to bring it? I do. And so the answer to political bias and politicizing the law is not to do it in a different direction. It's to stop doing it. And the DOJ does not seem to be getting that message. And a lot of this is on our political leaders. You got to write the law in a clear fashion. You got to prioritize the Constitution. Too many lawmakers, and as somebody that's written law, that's helped members of Congress draft law, too many lawmakers don't ask the constitutional question first. They leave it up to courts to decide it. You see this all the time with legislatures passing laws that are creative, that they like, and then the court strikes them down because they're not constitutional. I think that the legislative branches of government, both federal and state, have an obligation, before you make a law, look at it and say, is it constitutional? That is a gating question to doing that task that so many of our leaders, they don't care. They just want to, you ask for something, they want to give it to you in the way that you want it. They don't really wrestle with some of the constitutional implications of that. And I think the ones that do a good job can potentially change law in a way that is very, very good. I'll give you a key example of this. Alabama's law, or not Alabama's law, Alabama has one, I think, but Tennessee recently enacted a law about age verification for pornography. And they did their homework. They leveraged the definition of obscenity in case law, and they looked at how the law was set up, and they passed a law that I think can withstand judicial scrutiny because they're thinking about how can I make this law and make sure that it's consistent with the Constitution. If you don't do that, then you have to have your attorney general go and spin in front of the courts trying to say that it is. But I think that's an example of a law where the legislature was really thoughtful, worked with the AG to make sure that the contours of that law was where it needed to be. But I'm not looking for sticky laws that drag people in just because it serves my political interest. In fact, I don't want that. I want fewer laws. I want more freedom. That's how it works. I think we mess up tremendously when we start playing the game and say, well, this applies to a political opponent, so I guess it's okay. It's too easy in the current climate where we're inundated with social media and everything else going on to lose sight of what's important here. When we're talking about politics and we're talking about the rule of law and the law itself, we need to make sure that we're in the corner of the Constitution, not in the corner of I get what I want and government is my weapon. We should absolutely not do that as conservatives. I appreciate you guys hanging with me. I love your calls. Members Nutrition, Super Talk text line. Again, the number is 615-737-9986. When we come back, talk about the Lee letter, and I want to talk about some of the practices that I'm engaging with social media to try to wean off of the addiction. It's something that we need to do. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to The Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7.
Closing arguments currently underway in the Hunter Biden trial. And Secretary of State Blinken, he's back in the Middle East working on that Gaza deal. We'll have those stories coming up at 1:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back. I'm Cameron Smith. You can follow me on X at DCameronSmith. That's D as in David, Cameron Smith. That's where I post a lot of the stuff that I write for the Tennessean. It's where you can join the conversation. I like hashtag DN Politics as a way of following some of the conversation. So when you guys have stuff from a policy or political standpoint that you want to open it up to folks, use that hashtag so people can search for it and be part of the conversation. Again, hashtag TN Politics. Tom, I see you over in Kingston Springs. We'll get there to you in just a minute. Heather had a really interesting point. She said, if we don't start, basically, and I'll paraphrase what she said, if we don't start acting like Democrats, it's going to be really tough to win. Actually, I disagree with that. I don't think that we're losing as much as folks think we are. I know that it's easy to, look at the internet and look at headlines and news and say, oh, we're losing. You know who feels the exact same way? Democrats. They're looking at the polling and looking at other things and saying, how in the world is this a tight race between Joe Biden and a convicted Donald Trump? So I want to caution that narrative of the only way Republicans can win is by sham lawsuits and underhanded dealings. I just disagree with that. I'm not going to. I don't win by becoming the thing that I don't want. That's a big, big loser. But I see this all the time. I see it on the Super Talk text line now. I see it in a lot of the conversations that I have, a lot of feedback on my articles. It's, well, we can have our principles and lose, or we can get down in the mud and wrestle with Democrats and maybe win some. I think we just need to do it differently. Think of it this way. Democrats are sitting over there saying, I can't believe that this is a close race. Republicans should look at it and say, Joe Biden is so bad that a convicted Donald Trump might win this race. If that doesn't encourage you and make you see that, hey, conservative ideas actually can carry the day, then I don't know what to tell you. Because guess what? Most people's issues with Trump aren't about conservative ideas. They're about his personality. They're about his character. Even Democrats attacking him, it's the orange man bad. It's we don't like him. And so I think conservatives and conservative ideas do have a lot of traction right now. We're seeing that. And yes, Ray, I hear you that it's a bogus sham of a conviction, but it's a conviction in the state of New York. And that's something that, in consideration, it's a fact in the world. I can tell you that trial's biased. I think it should be overturned on appeal. But the point is, Joe Biden is actually that bad. That's how weak of a candidate he is. So I think Republicans need to be encouraged and say a lot of the ideas and things that we support actually can carry the day, actually can win. So I'm going to get to Tom right now. Kingston Spring, that's where we filmed the Ballad of Davy Crockett. Tom, what do you got?
The reason why Joe Biden was charged with this crime, Hunter Biden, wasn't in the original plea agreement that if he pled guilty to this, he would pretty much be free of any crime he committed before this point.
Okay, so there was a plea agreement. That plea agreement did fall apart.
But the original judge saw in the many pages that it would absolve him for any crime he committed before that point.
And so the judge was like, no.
Correct.
Yeah. And
so it's my opinion that the DOJ went to Hunter Biden and said, hey, plead to this and you're home free on everything else you've done.
Yeah, it still doesn't address the issue of this charge the way it is not often brought in this manner.
But once it became public, they couldn't back down from it.
Sure you can. prosecutorial discretion is something that the Supreme Court has supported for a very, very long time. They've done that in the immigration context. And so the ability of a prosecutor to say, you know what, basically we don't try this charge this way. So if that's all we've got to go on, then we're going to do something different. But
in this whole profile case and in this political environment, they, in my opinion, could not back down from it.
And what you're saying is actually agreeing with me, which is you said in this political environment. Yeah, it's political. And so that's why it's happening. That doesn't mean it's consistent.
But the original crime was not political. And like I said, it's really to cover up his other crimes, the original plea agreement, in my opinion.
Well, my question is, okay, he's still dealing with the tax charges. What other crimes is he being charged with?
None that we know of. That's my whole point.
Right, but my issue is if you're going to charge him with a crime, go ahead and do it. But the standalone thing right here where you're not arguing that he did anything unlawful with that gun other than this separate issue looks very political to me. Does it not look political to you?
That's mostly a no. I think you're missing my point. Let's go back to Burisma and all this other stuff that he's done throughout. I think DOJ knows there are crimes that he can charge him with. Therefore, in the plea agreement over the gun charge, they put in there, you plead guilty to this and you're free on all the other charges.
Right, but my point is, you're saying that they don't want to charge him with other crimes.
Exactly.
That in and of itself is a political decision. What I'm saying is if he's committed other crimes that they're aware of, they should charge him. This one standalone doesn't look consistent with the other way this charge is applied to other defendants. That's all I'm saying.
But in the original crime, I don't know how to express it any more than to say that I think the DOJ knows that he committed other crimes they could charge him with.
Sure.
But by giving him this original plea agreement, it would get him out of jail free.
Yeah, and typically it's a little weird to give someone sweeping immunity for any other criminal charges in a plea deal. You could, but it would typically be related to the same thing, and I'm not aware of any other gun-related charges that are out there against him or could be.
But if the judge had accepted that plea agreement, his name would not even be in the news right now, right?
He's Hunter Biden. He has a way of making it into the news.
There is that, but still.
All right. Well, I appreciate the call, Tom. I think Tom's point is there's other things that they should charge him with that they haven't charged him with. All right. That's a fair critique. I don't know what those things are specifically, but if that's sort of the way we look at it, sure. I think that's the thing. We got to take a break right now. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt Murphy on Super Talk 99.7.
Good afternoon. It's 1:31. I'm Jay Harper with your top stories. A full forecast in just a couple of minutes. Closing arguments began today in Hunter Biden's felony gun trial with prosecutors wrapping up their case. ABC's Olivia Rubin, she's standing outside the courthouse in Wilmington, Delaware with more.
Leah Wise doing the closing argument for the prosecutor began not with the case, not with the evidence, but what is not the evidence in the case. And he gestured his arm over towards the gallery where the first family is sitting. First Lady Joe Biden, Ashley Biden, Melissa Cohen Biden, James Biden, Valerie Biden. I could name more Bidens. And saying that is not evidence. None of that matters. And then he proceeded to lay out the prosecution's case for why the jury should convict Hunter Biden.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken begins his 8th trip to the Middle East this week since October 7th, telling reporters he believes negotiations for a ceasefire have reached a, quote, critical point. ABC's Karen Travers explains.
Secretary Blinken said that all countries that have ties to Hamas should be pushing the group to accept this deal. He said, if you want to end the suffering of the Palestinian people in Gaza, press Hamas to say yes. If you want to get the hostages home, press Hamas to say yes. In terms terms of a timeline, Secretary Blinken could not say when they expected to get a formal response from Hamas, but said there is a sense of urgency right now from all parties involved.
That is the latest news. Weather is next. I'm Jay Harper, WTN News.
Man, this has been fun, y'all. I'm Cameron Smith. Matt's at a wedding. It's getting hot out there. It's a beautiful day. It's starting to get a little warm. I'm excited about the sunshine. I very much enjoy it. I wanted to get to a couple of your comments on the Hunter Biden stuff. Ray pointed out, well, this prosecution against Trump, well, it's politically biased. It's a sham. And I've said that. I've been very clear about that. I think it's politically biased. I think it should be overturned on appeal. When I refer to Trump as a convict or being convicted, that's just a fact in the state of New York. It's not a reflection on how I feel about the trial. The trial, I think, was a hot mess. Ray made the point, and I think it's worth addressing because I think a lot of people feel this way. He said every Republican attorney general and DA should start doing the same dang thing to Biden, Clinton, every one of them. That's where I disagree. Again, I don't think that we should do what Democrats do because they do it. Then we're no better. We're the same, just in a different direction. If you want to be Democrat light, go ahead. I don't. I'm a conservative who says we support the rule of law. We don't use the law and government as a weapon against our enemies because that's wrong. If they commit a crime, prosecute them. If you're just looking to tangle them up and do that stuff, we've said that's wrong. We've said that doesn't look fair. That looks like lawfare. It looks like all this bad stuff. Then to argue that, oh, well, we need to do it. No, we don't. That's nuts. That is absolutely crazy. And I guess maybe it's because I spend a lot of time with the 4 boys in my household and I got all kinds of stuff that drives me insane. I don't get too worked up about that. And I'm not going to let my anger make me do things that are unprincipled or against my character. I'm just not going to do that. I would encourage you guys to do the same. It's easy to do the eye for an eye thing, but when you're doing things that your political opponents do, you kind of become like them. And I don't support that. I don't think we should do that. And I hear you. I understand the frustration because when I looked at several different aspects of that New York trial, I just said, and you heard me on this radio station saying, actually, I think that this is going to be a hung jury or an acquittal. And we saw a conviction. 0708 says, do unto others as how I was raised, and it's great advice. It's do unto others as you would have them do to you. So if you want to have sham trials levied against you, do it to them. But if you don't want it done, then don't. And I'm not suggesting at all that we should not prosecute folks who violate the law. We should absolutely do that. Because if you don't, then you got criminals just wandering around the streets. But the idea that this is a tool to be levied against politicians, that's what Democrats have done? No. We don't need to play that game. 1440 said, and that's why we always lose. You and others like you is why the Democrats have convicted a politician is because they know it won't be down back. I guess it won't happen to them. Well, guess what? It does happen to them. Democrats are convicted with regularity. Look at the senator out of New Jersey. He's going to probably go to jail for a real long time. We hadn't talked about that too much because it doesn't fit the narrative conveniently. And we'll use Clinton as an example. I absolutely believe that Hillary Clinton and her handling of those classified documents should have been prosecuted. Absolutely. I read every memo related to that, and that was extremely frustrating that was declined. But if I believe that is the case, then I got to believe that Trump's handling and Biden's handling of those classified documents also deserves the same treatment. Patrick pointed out that conservative frustration isn't that we want to do battle like Democrats. It's every conservative rolls over and won't stand up for our rights, won't take action, decisive action. We tend to be as weak as well-water party. I'm not calling for that either. The Mitch McConnell angle is not my thing. I actually fought Mitch McConnell's team when I was in the Senate working for Jeff Sessions, because Mitch McConnell's folks would explain to me why we couldn't do conservative things, and we would live to fight again another day. And it drove me insane, because I think that's the wrong mindset for Republicans. The right mindset is to engage people well, is to say, hey, we've got a better plan for leadership. We've got a better direction. We're going to do better on life issues. We're going to do better on your civil liberties, not just gun issues, but everything. Speech, you name it. Like you are going to be freer and better off because you work and support Republicans. Work with and support Republicans. Be better at what you do as opposed to acting like the people that you don't like. And if you don't like weak-kneed, thin-skinned Republican types, I am with you. I'll tell you, though, I think the weak-kneed, thin-skinned ones are the ones that always tell you what you want to hear. If they're holding up their hand in the wind and saying, what do these people like? How can I make them not look at me and look at somebody else like Nancy Pelosi? Those are the ones that are a problem. Because at some point, you got to tell people the truth. And the truth hurts. And I want to talk specifically about that right now. I don't know how many of y'all saw this letter that popped out, but Senator Mike Lee out of Utah sort of threw down the gauntlet. He posted on X and he said, strongly worded statements are not enough. Yeah, tell me about it. I'm had it up to here with strongly worded statements. Those who turned our judicial system into a political cudgel must be held accountable. Yeah, that sounds good so far. But here's the problem. At some point along the way, this thing turned into partisan performance art. We are no longer cooperating, this is a quote, we are no longer cooperating with any Democratic legislative priorities or nominations. And we invite all concerned senators to join our stand. First of all, I don't know who thought that Republican senators were working with Democrats. I must have missed that, because most of what I've seen is the opposite of that, which is fine. Republicans and Democrats disagree on a lot of things. But this was just to get something out there in relation to the Trump trial, to say, well, because Alvin Bragg committed political overreach, somehow that has something to do with the White House. The White House, there are Democrats there, so we're not going to do our job in the Senate. This is an insane way for Senate Republicans to say that not doing their job is how they fight back against Alvin Bragg. For every one of you guys, that should seem a little bit like raising an eyebrow, like, tell me more about that. I disagree with the Democrats on a number of issues: immigration, Second Amendment, abortion, public school choice. But there's a lot of areas like transportation policy, foreign policy, AI, regulatory reform that I might agree with a Democrat on. They might have some things where there's common ground. And a blanket refusal to work with Democrats is basically ineffective representation. It just is. And if you look at that letter that Lee circulated, I think Senator Blackburn signed it. If you look at the letter, the political speak jumps out. Here's what they say they're going to do. They're going to fight. They're going to make their big stand on 3 points. 1, we will not allow any increase in non-security related funding for this administration or any appropriations bill which funds partisan lawfare. Let me break that down for you. We are already in bloated spending land because of COVID. We are spending out the yin-yang. We are racking up $1 trillion in debt every 100 days. So if any of these Republicans that signed this letter were even thinking about an increase in non-security related spending, they need to be retired by the constituents. So that's a nothing burger. Which funds partisan lawfare. What did you think? Did you think that an appropriations bill that originates in the House of Representatives is going to contain, this is for lawfare spending. Of course not. That gives them a lot of flexibility to determine when and where that term applies. So that's a nothing burger. 2, they're not going to vote to confirm this administration's political and judicial appointees. That's fair. We've been fighting over those for a long time. If you don't think somebody's qualified or capable of doing the job effectively, you should absolutely vote against them. Otherwise, you should vote for them. The idea that you're somehow punishing somebody by not voting for someone that the folks in your state would say, hey, that's actually a pretty good idea. Again, this is a nothing burger. 3, we will not allow expedited consideration and passage of Democratic legislation or authorities that are not directly relevant for the safety of the American people. This is called unanimous consent. We're going to deny unanimous consent for stuff that's not related to the safety of the American people. Well, guess what? We're in an election year. We're not moving a ton of legislation anyway. And if they want to support it, they'll just say it's for the safety of the American people. Again, nothing. So it's just a strongly worded statement that's saying, hey, we're fearless fighters, but there's nothing there because it's political speak. This is the kind of stuff that we have to just, as Republicans and conservatives, look at our own and say, guys, what are we doing here? Like, if you want to say I stand with Donald Trump, that's fine. If you want to say we don't like that the Bragg prosecution was politically biased, say that. That makes a lot of sense. But to try to make people feel like we're drawing a real line in the sand, we're getting after it, when you're not, well, that's not right. For example, if you, I don't know why it relates at all to the Bragg prosecution, but I would say the COVID spending levels are out of control, and I'm not going to vote for any non-discretionary spending that doesn't rein in spending. Forget increasing. A real conservative is going to say, you know, we've got to rein it back in. If we don't cut discretionary, non-defense discretionary spending by 15%, I'm not going to vote for it. Again, it has nothing to do with Bragg, but that's what a conservative would throw out there. Not going to vote for any political or judicial appointees that won't uphold the rule of law consistently. Fine. I will support that all day long. Again, I don't see what it has to do with Bragg and the New York prosecution. And I don't really understand why we have to have unanimous consent on most stuff anyways. I worked in the Senate. I know why they do it. It's because the Senate doesn't like to do as much legislation as the House. They don't want to have to go through the process of a cloture vote, considering everything, go through their full timeline. They just want to run stuff through quickly. As a conservative, I don't love that anyway. Again, it doesn't have anything to do with Bragg. And until we realize that the political class here, they go and vote. It's not a terribly hard job. Trust me, guys, I've been there. The hardest aspect of the representation job is that people recognize you and that talk to you in the grocery store. It's very hard to set down your political job on the weekends and in the evenings. You're kind of always on. That aspect is difficult, but the job itself, you in the Senate raise your hand and in the House you press a button. That's the job. And they work for us. And so we need to start expecting more if we're going to change things. And I'm assuming most of you guys don't like this stuff as much as I do. Anyway, we got to take a break. We'll get back to the rest of this on the other side. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7.
Former President Trump meeting virtually with probation officers today ahead of next month's sentencing. What will that hold? And we'll also have the latest on the Hunter Biden gun trial and a woman walking her dog in Bellevue, robbed with an unusual weapon. We'll have those stories at 2 p.m. on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back, and we're about to have to leave right away. We are flying through this. A lot of comments, a lot of things that I want to address in the next hour. I need some of y'all's advice with the beast, some of my kids. They're just kind of wild these days, but we're having a lot of fun. Y'all come back for the last hour. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Matt Murphy Show, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7. Come on back.
It is straight up 2 p.m., and I'm Jay Harper with your top stories. It's kind of warm, nice and sunny, 82 degrees. A full forecast coming up in a couple of minutes. Former President Trump meeting virtually with probation officers today ahead of sentencing next month in his criminal hush money trial. Officers will recommend what punishment they believe that Mr. Trump should receive. ABC's Aaron Katursky tells us if Trump's attitude towards those officers could influence his sentence.
Judge Juan Merchan, who's ultimately going to make the decision, knows well former President Trump's penchant for attacks. He's been the recipient of many of them. So whether that specifically is going to be a new factor for him seems unlikely.
The former president could face up to 4 years in prison, although it's generally thought that a fine or community service is more likely. Closing arguments underway in Hunter Biden's federal gun trial. He's charged with lying on a background check form about his drug use. ABC's Stephen Portnoy has the latest.
Defense attorneys wrapped up their case with the president's son declining to take the stand in his own defense. Judge Mary Ellen Orica advised jurors not to attach any significance to that. The First Lady, Hunter Biden's sister Ashley, and his wife Melissa are all dressed in black in a packed courtroom as the trial reaches its climax with closing arguments.
2 men back here in Nashville arrested after a woman was robbed while walking her dog at the Cortland Bellevue Apartments on Old Hickory Boulevard yesterday. Metro Police spoke with a woman there who said 3 men approached her. One of them was carrying a fire extinguisher and then sprayed her and her dog with the extinguisher. She was then pushed to the ground, struck repeatedly, and her purse, cell phone, and car keys were taken. Police responding to the scene identified 22-year-old Quishan DeMumbrium and 18-year-old Lamar Maddox walking along Old Hickory Boulevard, and they found the woman's keys and one of their backpacks. Her other belongings were found near a ditch by the apartment complex. Those 2 men were booked on felony robbery charges. They're still looking for the third suspect. That is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Jay Harper, WTN News.
We are in the final hour of the Matt Murphy Show. I'm Cameron Smith, filling in for Matt as he's off at a wedding. He'll be back. As I've often said, like Radio Grandpa, I'm here to get you all ginned up on sugar and caffeine and then give you back to Matt. So it should be fun. I was reading an article about the International Space Station and leaks. That doesn't sound like a place that you'd want to have a leak if you're in the International Space Station, but I digress. I wanted to clarify one point, and I looked it up to make sure it was technically accurate, because some of y'all have said, well, what's Trump's status right now as it pertains to the New York conviction? Whether we can use the term convicted felon or not, whether that's appropriate or not. Technically, although the jury came back with a conviction, until July 11th, which is when the sentencing is going to happen, and Judge Merchan is going to enter that guilty verdict. Technically, the jury has found him guilty, but he has not yet had that entry of that verdict, which will happen in all likelihood on July 11th. There is a chance that in the intervening amount of time, his defense team could make an appeal to a federal judge and say, given the constitutional infirmities in this case, as far as the charging instructions or other things, we think that you need to prevent the judge from entering that guilty verdict pending appeal of the constitutional issues. So technically, that's where we are. Yes, the verdict handed down by the jury was clear, but the order or the judgment of guilty has not been technically entered yet. Probably arguing a little bit over semantics here, but I wanted to be real precise because I do think it matters. Democrats obviously are very giddy about branding Trump as a convict, which I think is kind of weird. I don't want to brand anybody as that. But that's the technical status, and I wanted to get through that. I also think I actually had a good conversation with Dan Mandis earlier today when I was coming to the radio station about kind of where we are as Republicans and conservatives. And I do think this is an important discussion to have because, as you guys know, I tend to call balls and strikes. That's my approach. That's kind of how I deal with it. And I was talking to Dan about the difference in perspective, because I think for a long time, and this is how I've mentioned this to those of y'all who've listened to me over time and seen some of the stuff that I've written, that I couldn't stand the Mitch McConnell wing of the party when I was a staffer on Capitol Hill, because I felt like it was a whole lot of doing nothing. It was, let's wait for the opportunity to do conservative things, to secure the border. That was a big issue. Let's wait to really press and try to move things in a more conservative direction. And that's where people came to loathe the what we'll call the establishment. I think that term varies for a lot of people as to who it encapsulates and who it doesn't, because technically, I guess anybody that's part of the Republican political apparatus at some point becomes, I guess, established. I would argue that Trump at this point is an established politician. You wouldn't say he was part of the establishment, whatever that means. But I think that for a long time, it was those kind of folks, the Jeb Bushes, the Mitt Romneys, the Mitch McConnells, that created this sort of top-down approach to Republican governance. I didn't like that aspect, that there were some people in the know in D.C. that got to decide what it meant to be conservative, what it meant to be Republican, and that everybody else had to just kind of go along with it. Vote for John McCain for president, that kind of stuff. He's another good example of that type of Republicanism. I didn't like that. And I didn't like the idea that some of those Republicans seem to work for the corporate interest, not for free markets, but for big companies. I don't like that. The Trump era brought in a major shift in Republican politics. There's no arguing that point whatsoever. I call it populist, but it's the I want to win. I'm tired of folks not telling me that we have these principles so we can't do stuff. This guy wants to punch people in the mouth. And folks are interested in that. I don't think there's anything wrong with a more aggressive style of conservative. I certainly want to win too. But what happened is major control shift. So that the Trump, we'll call it the MAGA wing of the Republican Party, is absolutely in the driver's seat right now. Call it 70, 80% of the party. And now you've got 20 or 30 that are sort of the principled conservative base. I don't really even count the never Trumpers, the Bill Kristols of the world is even really in the Republican Party anymore. They're more, it's gone to hell in a handbasket, we're out. And we want to criticize Republicans and get paid to do it. I think what's really important is for folks, and I would consider myself in the minority in that group because I am a principled conservative Republican. I care about policies. I'm a dork. I don't really care about personalities. It doesn't, the idea that somebody gets everyone excited at a speech does not matter to me. I want to know what laws you're proposing, what we're going to change, and then I deal with it like that. I realize that makes me in the minority because it makes me a dork. But if we don't think of the Republican Party in those terms of, hey, there's the MAGA approach and then there's the principled, consistent, conservative thing, and those guys have to work together well enough so that we can win elections, I think that's where we start to miss. And we kind of got to know where we are, and this is where Reagan's Big Ten approach was extremely successful. I think that's where some of the populist stuff is, if you're not this, and it was Carrie Lake out in Arizona, she's this way, that's the reason she lost, was if you're not this, then you're not wanted. If you're not in the 70, 80% of the Republican Party, then you should leave. That's dumb. That means Joe Biden wins and Democrats win. But I get the point of there's a tension right now that we've got to get through. And frankly, I would argue a lot of it is manufactured. Here's how I know that. So one of the things that I've tried to do lately is I realized how weird things were getting online. I realized the echo chamber that I was in and the things that I was seeing made me feel a certain way about everything, whether that's doom and gloom or under attack or let's go. And so per my wife's suggestion, we all wanted to get better at this. We took Facebook off our phones. Can still look at it online, like on my laptop when I'm working for work purposes. Same with X. I left it on my phone. It's probably coming off, but I put a 30-minute timer a day. And my mindset has changed radically. Like when I talk to real humans in the world around here in Middle Tennessee, the daylight between the different components in the Republican Party just kind of fades away. And frankly, some of the differences with a lot of the Democrats fade away because Democrats in Tennessee are a lot different than Democrats elsewhere in the country. They're much more conservative. Now, some of them aren't, but if you put down the things that are constantly feeding your brain the narrative and start thinking again, I mean, it is shocking at what happens. And this has been weird. It's truthfully, I was in the car the other day and I looked at my hand and my phone's in it and I don't know why. And that's what really made me start thinking. I kind of threw it in the floorboard because I really don't like the idea of I don't even know why I'm doing this stuff anymore. How many of you guys have been doom scrolling and don't know why? You're just sitting there and it's like, wow, this is in my hand. I don't even remember anything I really looked at. I saw a hydraulic press squish a bunch of stuff. I think that's what's happening. Jason is, if I had a spirit animal on 99.7, it would be Jason, because Jason said, you talk to real people? Hard pass. Yeah, man, like real ones. We have great conversations. Sometimes we have dinner together. We have coffee. And I can talk about this stuff. And it's not weird. But I go on X for even a few minutes. And I think that the world is on fire. And it's just not. It's just not. When I do life around here, the folks that can hear the sound of my voice right now, life's actually pretty good. Now, we see some political things and we're like, I don't know about that. Might talk about the election, but it very seldom is it like, let's punch everyone in the face. It's pretty normal. And I just don't want to be somebody else's political puppet. I just don't want that. And I'll give you an example from, I saw the headline, Trump said at a rally, it's in video, y'all can Google it, you can see it and listen for yourself. But he said, I don't care about you, I just want your vote. And now everyone is seizing on that and saying, see, he said the quiet part out loud. Trump doesn't really care about you. Well, what does that even mean? Let's break that down. Donald Trump doesn't even know me. Like, what? Do I want him to care about me? I mean, I guess I want him to consider my interest, but I want that from anybody. Do I really believe that Joe Biden cares about me? Joe Biden doesn't know where he is half the time. I'm guessing he doesn't care about me either. In fact, when I look at the political, there are very few politicians that I don't personally know who I think generally care about me and look for my interests. And this is the type of thing that people seize on, and then they say, well, you see, you understand. Well, Trump's a politician just like all the other ones. I know that sounds weird, but it's true. And so if he's saying, I don't care about you, I just want your vote, well, that could apply to most politicians. And so the idea that Democrats like Biden are standing there, well, the truth is I super duper double care about you. No, they don't. And maybe this is just after a career of working in and around politics. Maybe I'm a little tired. Maybe I'm a little cranky. But I think the number of folks that are genuinely interested in service versus becoming a B, C, D list celebrity are vanishingly small. I know a handful of them. I'm not saying there's none out there, but I just, and this is concerning because I start to sound a little more like Chris Hand. But when he talks about the uniparty, I don't think that that's like a formal entity, but I don't think there's as much daylight between the political parties as people want to believe there is. We've just got a lot of failed leadership everywhere. This stuff shouldn't take long. This immigration is a great example. I've been literally talking about immigration for my entire political career. When I went into the Senate Judiciary Committee, that was 2007, 2008, somewhere around there. I was arguing and fighting with John McCain over his big amnesty bill. We've been talking about this stuff a long time. Anybody, imagine that you're at work and folks tell you that to solve a basic problem, it's going to take 15 years, 20 years. You would laugh at them. You say, that's ridiculous. That's no reasonable timeline to address a pretty basic problem. But that's what our political class does. That's the reason that when we talk about these things, I'm trying to make the argument that, like, you don't have as many friends in the political space as you might think. There's not as many fearless fighters. It's just politics in a different direction. And when we start looking at the problems as how does it impact your family and mine? Well, then what? How are they doing? I mean, we see inflation as a problem. I think you probably do too. And if the best answer anyone is currently putting on the table is, well, we'll slow the rate of inflation. After what we've just been through, the number of people that I talk to who are pointing out that going to fast casual and going to a sit-down restaurant, the cost difference is negligible right now. That's concerning. What are they going to do about it? Well, Joe Biden has allowed runaway inflation. Yeah, I get it. I know it's a problem. Don't tell me what the problem is. Tell me what we're going to do about it. Tell me how you're going to rein in government spending so that we don't have a bunch of like fake money running around. Well, we don't want to spend more than you're already spending too much. Every 100 days, $1 trillion added to the debt. That is the problem. If you want me to get excited and animated, I'm normally pretty level. That's what gets me fired up, is we've known these problems. And the political class keeps us so distracted about everything else that we're not dealing with any of the underlying issues. Think about it. How many Republican politicians have you heard from that have told you about the runaway immigration problem at the border? And they point to a bill that they passed that they knew the Senate wouldn't take up as evidence they're doing something. Well, if the Senate's going to do something that you're not going to take up and you're not going to take up what the Senate's doing, I guess the answer is, well, we're not going to do nothing. And this is where when we retreat to our respective corners and say we don't work with the others, kind of like Lee and company did, we can't solve some of these big problems. It's also why we need to be federalists and don't need to have the power at the federal government. That is absolutely ridiculous. I want to get your thoughts on this. The Members Nutrition Super Talk text line, 615-737-9986. Let's talk. I'll look at your comments during the break, but I think this is a conversation we need to have. I'm Cameron Smith. This is the Matt Murphy Show, and you're listening to Super Talk 99.7.
Donald Trump speaking to the Life and Liberty Forum today. We'll have some of what he said. Beefed up security for next month's NATO summit in D.C. And a major company says it's getting so close to having a one-shot COVID flu vaccine. We'll have those stories at 2:30 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Welcome back. Man, you guys have been great today. When you guys engage, it makes it so much fun, and it makes the day go well. So I really enjoy that. Several of y'all on the Superdoc text line, I have mentioned the quote, "I don't care about you, I just want your vote," from Donald Trump. And y'all have said, well, where'd you get that? He didn't say that. He'd never say that. If he did say that, it's out of context. First of all, I don't know how you're jumping to all of those conclusions. Second of all, I want to make sure that I'm not making something up and don't want you guys to have this sense of, well, Cameron just says stuff. No, this is the clip. Belle, I think you've got it. If you can play that clip, that'd be great.
By the way, isn't that breeze nice? Do you feel the breeze? Because I don't want anybody going on me. We need every voter. I don't care about you. I just want your vote. I don't care. See, now the press will take that and they'll say he said a horrible thing.
Yeah, because he said the thing. And what happened there is Trump was just riffing. He said something. And then his follow-up was, well, the press will say he said a horrible thing, as if he didn't say the thing. I don't know what context you want me to put that in. That's exactly what he said. I think he's kidding around. That's pretty clear. And I don't think that this idea of, and Dave said, Cameron, you took that totally out of context and you know it. No, that I just played it for you. That's the context. That's what he said. And my point was that, you know, the Biden campaign is using this as like clear evidence that they care and he doesn't. No. Politicians want votes. There's no secret there. The idea that they can know everybody. No, they can't. And so when he says something like this, I don't think any Trump voter is going to look at him and say, he doesn't care about me now. He told me as much. He's just riffing. He's doing his thing. And the idea that we live in a culture where this thing becomes a thing is ridiculous. But that's where we are, because everyone wants to take everything in a way that's advantageous to their narrative and against their opponent's narrative. Trump cares as much about the voters as any other politician. This is sort of like those people that say my biggest weakness is I care too much. Well, guess what? In the political class, that's not a thing. They're trying to get your vote so that they can win. That's what they're trying to do.
I just try too hard.
I know. I try too hard. I need to. I care too much. And it's okay for these folks. And before all of y'all get exasperated and act like, I'm telling you, I think he was joking around. But that's not how it's been taken across the whole of media. There's one article after another that said Trump doesn't care. And the false implication is that there are these other politicians who do really care, who really want, I guess they want you to be wonderful and great, and they don't just want your vote. They want all the good things for you. Bleh. And I think this is just our culture, where we are right now. And I think it's Jason's biggest weakness too. He cares too much. He's just caring all over the chat line, everything.
Hey, look, it gets his bunt cake, so I care all he needs to.
Well, as long as bunt cakes are associated with it. But this is what our politics have devolved through. And people are so rushing to get to a headline and a comment that they don't ever look at what's going on. And I don't know if we can walk this back. I don't know if there's any way that we go back to being normal as opposed to constantly gaslighting everybody and making everyone upset.
I'm still waiting for Trump just to flat out say, I hate puppies and I want to kill them just for the journalistic fallout.
Well, you should
news fallout.
You should be excited. I've heard that they're going to have a kitten punning contest at his next rally.
Of course, naturally.
Big if true. Big if true. What is true is we got to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to the Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7.
Good afternoon. It's 2:31. I'm Jay Harper with your top stories. Mostly sunny, 82 degrees. We'll get that forecast to you here shortly. Donald Trump making a virtual appearance during the Life and Liberty Forum hosted by the Danbury Institute today. The organization, which is dedicated to promoting Judeo-Christian values, has taken a strong stance on the subject of reproductive rights. While Trump did not reference abortion or whether he would move to enact a national ban while in office, Trump did reference innocent life when vowing to protect the assembly's rights and values.
We have to defend religious liberty, free speech, innocent life, and the heritage and tradition that built America into the greatest nation.
Ahead of next month's NATO summit in Washington, D.C., the Secret Service gave a preliminary press conference earlier today to outline the planned security protocol from the city's operations center. Matt Stoller, the Secret Service special agent in charge of D.C.'s field office, says they're still finalizing the details, but some residents and visitors can experience disruptions in certain areas during that event.
While we strive to minimize any inconvenience, people should expect to experience increased traffic on both roads and walkways due to street closures and other restrictions, particularly in areas where the events will occur.
Pharmaceutical company Moderna, they've been working on a vaccine that protects against both COVID-19 and the flu. They say in clinical trials involving 8,000 adults, all older than 50 years of age, half over 65, a new combination shot provided a strong immune response to both illnesses with only mild side effects. Moderna has offered no timetable, though, on having the drug on the market. That is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Jay Harper, WTN News.
we are quickly running out of time on the Matt Murphy Show, and you guys have been absolutely wonderful. We have a special treat, and that Ray from Silver Point is calling in. I don't want y'all to hold it against him. He's Mitt Romney's #1 fan and seems to have I don't know if it's a George Conway fetish or what it is, but anyway, Ray. The remark says, Ray is calling about my stupidity. What's up, Ray?
Hey, never Trumper, Cameron, Conway, Romney.
I think it's Romney Conway, but go ahead.
And I switched it up.
Okay, fair enough.
Two things to say. Number one, when you say that President Trump is a convicted felon, it comes across that you're saying it with a smile on your face, like a smugness, just like the ones I listed.
Why is there smugness with saying a fact?
That the way you come across saying it is that you're saying it with a smile on your face, just like...
I'm not smiling. In fact, I've argued that the trial was incredibly biased and should be overturned on appeal. So next, go ahead.
All right. Next, number two is you need to listen to that clip you played again. That was from the Las Vegas thing where you're saying Trump is saying he doesn't care. He's talking about the breeze, and he is saying that you're doing exactly what he's saying that Dementia Biden and the liberal loons will do, is accuse him of not caring about people.
Whoa, Ray. I said that he was joking, it appears, but he says, I don't care about you. I just want your vote. He's not talking about the breeze at all. That's just false. He's kidding around.
In context, you are doing exactly what the liberals do. And
Ray, hang on, man.
You're not a conservative.
Ray.
I'm done.
Okay.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Okay, Ray. Well, I hate that for you, Ray. I mean, that's sad. Trump was joking around in that context. He did say what he said, and then it becomes a Politico article. It becomes a headline on CNN. Everybody runs with it. And we've got to have a little more resilience. Like, I don't mind joking around about that stuff, but, like, that's what Trump's doing. And if the issue is nobody can mention that he was joking around about this stuff, or we've got to say it like, look what he does. He doesn't care about you. I was simply pointing out that even if he wasn't joking and what he said is true, what other politicians would you say really do? I don't have that many. I mean, the ones I know, maybe, and we talk, yeah, sure, maybe, but most politicians are doing a job.
He has this innate need to say things that he knows are going to cause his opponents' heads to pop off.
Yes.
Like the whole thing about, I'll be a dictator for one day. He said that because he knew what was going to happen in the aftermath. And I just had this vision of him sitting on his plane with an iPad going, oh, look at this idiot, he bought into it.
Right.
And now I'll be a dictator for one day has turned into, I'll be a dictator from day one.
Right. And that to me, in either direction, I find it ridiculous. And my critique of Trump is not that he isn't joking. It's that when he says the stuff with the purpose of trolling folks, it creates a distraction for the policy stuff that he does. Because what I actually care about and how I define a conservative and address a conservative is what they do from a policy perspective. Because frankly, my feelings about all the rest of the stuff are my feelings. What we actually do to limit government, to improve personal responsibility and uphold the rule of law, that's how I measure a conservative, is like, what did you actually do? Don't tell me there's an immigration problem. What did you actually do about it? Here's Craig in Chapel Hill. I hope he is not as excited as Ray is. Oh, hang on. There you go, Craig. What's up?
Hey, buddy. How you doing? Just wanted to call and like what you're talking about. And, I think you make a lot of really, really good points.
Thank you.
I'm over our local party down in Marshall County, Tennessee.
Okay.
And, I wear a Trump cap. And I tell you, it can lead to a lot of conversational pieces. When you walk into Walmart, you got some people that'll come up and pat you on the back, shake your hand, and say, he's my guy. Then I got some people that comes up behind me and they wish the best, but they prosecute him.
Yeah.
So, it's all about sitting down and having a conversation, and I think we let it lead to one person rather than the whole issue of what we're trying to do is put our country back on track.
Yeah, amen, Craig. I'm wholly with you, and I agree with you. But here's the deal: if I see you in a, I'm assuming it's a MAGA hat, like the red one. That what you're talking about, or is it a different one?
Well, I make up my own. I got Trump, and then 2024, and it's kind of a different style hat, and just I've got a warped head, and I've got a certain hat I like to wear. So I just got Trump 2024. So it does make some conversational pieces, and you either love it or you hate it, or some people just don't understand it.
Yeah, well, I mean, my deal is be nice. Like, even if you disagree and saying, I don't think so, I'm a Biden person, well, they can come up and talk to you about that. They're not. But if somebody comes up and he's either and attacks you and is like, you must be a flaming idiot because of that hat, that's the kind of weirdo stuff we got to get away from. I mean,
well, I tell you, I went to Washington D.C. and I had my tie on, and Congressman Andy Ogles, we were at his office, and we left and went to see the sights, and people got to rolling their eyes at my tie, because it had the Republican tie on there. And,
sure.
And my girlfriend was asking, she said, do you notice people the way they look at you? And I said, no, I really don't. And so it goes back to having a conversation, and I think that's where we're lacking in the country today is having a straightforward conversation and getting back to the what we agree on, and it's okay to disagree.
Yes.
But again, we want to best first.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. Thanks, Craig. I think kind of lost you there for a second, but Craig's on it. You should have your opinions and perspectives on all this stuff. There's nothing wrong with that. Who you want to vote for, why you want to do it. I'm not going to criticize you for your opinion. I may want to have a discussion. I may say, well, hey, I think this. Why do you think that? And I may learn from that exchange. But I don't want to fight you. You're my fellow American, regardless of what political team you're on. If you're an American, then, hey, we've got an aligned interest there. And I think we easily forget that. And again, that goes to that echo chamber. And I'll use Ray as an example. Ray and I go back and forth on different stuff. And obviously he was a little upset today. But I appreciate that Ray chimes in. I appreciate that he has perspectives on stuff. Now, I'll argue with him. I've done a ton in my career that I can point to and show, hey, that's how we limited government. We increased individual liberty, upheld the rule of law, did the right thing where it mattered, not just in feelings and opinions, but in law. And I can defend my track record. I can also say, you know what? I value Ray's perspective and opinion. He'll take his shots at me, but when he calls in, I got on the Super Talk text line. I said, hey, is that you on the line? And he said yes. And he said, be prepared. And I said, let's go. Sounds good. Because if you can't deal with critics and you can't deal with people who have a different perspective than you, then you're a liberal snowflake. Just like them. You may not be liberal, you're still a snowflake. And that's what, I've got 4 boys of my own. That's what I'm raising them to address. You must be resilient. And this is the problem with social media and Facebook and all that other garbage, is that you get into an echo chamber where people only agree with you. The algorithm says, well, you like this stuff that tells you you're good and everybody likes you. And then when you hear something that you don't agree with, and I'm not saying Ray's this way, I'm saying that all of us are to a degree. Then when somebody says something you disagree with, it's like fighting words. Rather than just saying, okay, you have a different perspective. We disagree. There's nothing wrong with it. Craig said that. He said, we got to learn how to deal with disagreement better. I wholeheartedly agree. And that's what I can't stand. The biggest thing that I can't stand about the left right now is either you buy into every point of the left's orthodoxy or you're a deplorable. You're a worst. You're a white supremacist. You're all this other stuff. I can't handle that. And what happens is then I go back to my friends on the right, and then they're saying, if you don't lockstep this way with Donald Trump on everything, then you got to go. You can't be here either. I don't mind feeling politically homeless, but the whole point is where are the folks that say, I respect your right to have your perspective. I've got the big tent. That Reagan big tent mentality is gone. It should be, you're going to agree with me in the majority of cases, therefore you're on my team. And we're going to go and we're going to win and we're going to have a lot of success. We see this, the elections in the EU. We've seen that the woke stuff that happens in the EU, folks are starting to push back on that. And I do not think that conservative ideas, when I say that, I mean enhanced liberty, protection for the rule of law, saying the individual is accountable because they're free, like those type of things. Doing stuff that makes sense without virtue signaling. That's the kind of stuff that does have traction, and people really like it right now. And it's when we're angry and we're divisive that folks are like, well, I agree with them on most of this stuff, but like they seem outraged. And that outrage just comes from the echo chamber. We just cannot believe somebody would disagree with us. And we got to stop that. We got to get over that, because if we don't, we're going to pay dearly. And I don't know which way I look at the election and say it's worse. Is it Republicans have put up such a weak candidate that Joe Biden at this stage is still competitive, or Joe Biden's such a weak candidate that Republicans have put forth Trump and Trump could win again? That, to me, that's just a rough place to be across the board. We need better leadership. Got to take a break. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to The Matt Murphy Show on Super Talk 99.7. It is closing time. I'm sorry to have to depart. Y'all been great today. I really appreciate it. I apologize for any smirking that I may have done. It's natural. Those of you who see me on the video, I apologize. You have to look at my face, and I thank Josh for pointing out that I may, in fact, have a punchable face. All of these things may be true, but what I'm not sorry for is that I'm handing off to Brian Wilson and The Drive. Brian, what you got today?
Well, we got a lot. I think I'm going to start with the Hunter Biden trial because it is, I guess, going to go to the jury today, and we could have deliberations. It looks like a pretty open and shut case if you just look at the facts of the case. But the real question is, how will this jury receive this? This is a very pro-Biden jury. And it's being conducted in Biden's backyard, Delaware. And so the question is, how will that all go? I'll give you the thoughts of some of the smartest legal minds in America on that. We'll talk about the border. I'll have some more to talk about with regard to the Covenant investigation and some of the things that are now coming out with regard to that. There have been a flurry of articles written by the Tennessee Star. As you may know, we have been working very hard on this program to also reveal information. And I might have some new revelations today as the show progresses.
Well, thank you for staying on that. Hey, when is the last time you thought Congress actually addressed anything with immigration?
You know, we're in the silly season. I don't think that they really address much of anything except trying to gain political advantage one over the other. That's all that's going on right now as far as I can tell.
Yeah. Well, that sounds right to me. We've had a great show today. I'm excited about The Drive. Man, those are great topics. I love the fact that we're getting new information about the Covenant shooting. Y'all listen to Brian. Y'all have been great today. This is super exciting. I'm Cameron Smith. You're listening to Super Talk 99.7.